Hello, everyone, and welcome. For those of you just joining, we are so glad to have you today for this very special webinar with Rise. We're going to give it a minute as everyone fills into the room, and I'll just cover a few housekeeping items. So to get started, for those of you not familiar with Rise is an insurance community dedicated to helping early career professionals, attracting new talent to insurance, and providing resources for our members from across the industry. And we touch all different areas, but today we're going to focus on the claims area. And if you are, I guess, in the claims arena and interested, we have got a great presentation for you, all of the leaders today. So just a little bit of housekeeping about our webinar. If you have questions, and if you're not familiar with Zoom webinar, there is a chat and there is a Q&A. So feel free to put your true questions for presenters into the Q&A. And we will address those as we go forward. And if you have comments throughout, want to chat with other attendees, or have anything for our moderator running the webinar, please put that in the chat. This webinar will be recorded. It is not a CE webinar. This is a career development webinar. And also, just as a final note, it is being recorded and it will be available on our YouTube channel. So again, for those who aren't familiar, Rise professionals, please follow us on LinkedIn, follow our YouTube channel, LinkedIn, TikTok, all of those things. And so I'd like to go ahead and start by saying thank you to Ethos and thank you to Scott Francis for sponsoring today's webinar and for making this happen. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Scott to kick us off.
Great. Thank you so much, Amy. And thanks for everybody for joining what we hope is kind of a insightful and applicable webinar for those folks looking to build their claims career and kind of get advice on how do you get to the next level, regardless of where you are today. So as Amy said, I'm Scott Francis. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Accounts with Ethos. I'm also heavily involved with Rise. I currently sit on the strategic planning board. So a lot of the things that we're hoping to accomplish and value we're hoping to provide to the industry, I work with that group as well. And as part of that, we like to organize events like this where we can really provide great actionable information to the members of the insurance community. And so we have a phenomenal panel today to talk on this subject. I'll let everybody kind of go around and introduce themselves quickly. Cord, if you want to go ahead and get us started.
Sure. My name is Cord Farris. I'm the Managing Director for Utica, which is Accident Fund Insurance Company of America, which is owned by AF Group, which is a part of the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan entity. And I've been in the insurance claims community and claims professional for, believe it or not, 38 years, and have had multi-line and even some that people don't know and such in the ag world, multi-peril crop insurance and all kinds of crazy stuff. But currently I'm managing about 150 people that are claim professionals handling workers' compensation.
Thanks, Cord. Rob?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rob Baker. I serve currently as the Senior Vice President and Chief Claims Officer for Encova Insurance. I've been in the industry 16 years. I sit on Encova's senior leadership team and have responsibility for leading our claims organization. Prior to Encova, I was a claims general counselor and held several claims leadership positions with Travelers for several years. And prior to that, I was a lawyer in private practice with the Lewis Wagner firm in Indianapolis. And my practice focused primarily on trial and appellate work for the insurance industry. I'm excited about today's discussion. My career has been, I guess, not traditional or linear, and I'm passionate about career development, so I'm really excited to see everyone on the call today.
Excellent. Thanks, Rob. Steve?
Good afternoon, everyone. Steve Mraz with Utica National Insurance. I am the Vice President and Head of Core Claim Operations here at Utica. I've been in the industry 30 plus years as well, 7 of those with Utica. I've also spent time with larger carriers, both Liberty Mutual and Progressive. In my current role as head of core claims operations, I have responsibility for a number of different claims disciplines within our organization: auto material damage, property, workers' compensation, our centralized subrogation unit, our no-fault unit, as well as Utica National owns Founders Insurance, which is a small non-standard regional out of Chicago. So span of control is somewhere between 250 and 300 people. My entirety of my career has been in claims, and so a discussion like this I welcome and look forward to. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So thank you all again for putting your time and effort into this. We had a number of planning sessions talking about how can we provide the most value to the folks that attend this webinar. And we talked through how at various stages in your career, you're going to be focused on different things as an individual building a claims career. And we're going to get into kind of each of those phases. What should you be doing and ensuring that you're successful today, but also preparing yourself for the next step. But before we do that, there's a couple of common kind of themes that came up in our discussions throughout a claims career that really are impactful, I think, for folks looking to figure out, is this the right career for me? Is this a place where I can build a home, over a longer period of time? And so one of the things that we had talked about was really the importance of understanding the industry. And so, Rob, can you talk a little bit about why it's so important to understand how the insurance business works when you're figuring out if this is the right career for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously today's discussion is entitled Climbing the Claims Ladder. So we are going to talk about claims career and claims pathing. But I think when we did our prep session, we kind of got thinking about themes and beyond the claims arena. I think having a broad-based industry understanding or knowledge is important for everyone's career development in claims for several reasons. I think first and foremost, right out of the gate, having this broad-based industry knowledge or understanding is really going to help you excel in your current claims position, regardless of your level. And what I mean by that, when we talk about industry knowledge, what we're really talking about is understanding how the insurance business works and where claims fit into that business. And having that understanding gives you a perspective that helps not only your day-to-day claims handling, but I think more importantly for your career, it helps you interact with other leaders within your organization and helps you effectively build relationships with external stakeholders. And as you go higher in the ladder, having this knowledge becomes more and more important. Two other quick reasons why I think industry knowledge is important. Secondly, it really helps you set yourself apart from other candidates when you think about applying to that next level role. I'm sure for most of the folks on the call, important for your organization is how claims leaders interact and collaborate with different areas of your organization. And so when you think about interviewing for that claims leader role, one of the ways that you can really demonstrate how you might be an effective collaborator across the organization is really demonstrating, a keen understanding of the industry. And I think about when I interview folks, I'm always asking questions to kind of probe to see what is their industry knowledge? Do they have a good appreciation of how the business works? And for me, a candidate who can demonstrate that understanding, it really shows to me that they're interested in their development. They've taken the time to understand the industry that they are in and really demonstrates that they're on this kind of insurance professional claims path. And the last thing I'll comment is the broader that your industry understanding is, I think it opens your eyes to opportunities for next level positions, even outside of claim. Sometimes you look around and that next level opportunity, it might not be necessarily in claim. There might be a leadership opportunity or technical opportunity in another area of your organization. And for me, for my claims organization, being an exporter of talent is something that I really hold important. It is good for claims professionals to move outside of claims at times, to see other parts of the company, broaden their skill set, get a different perspective. And a lot of times they end up coming back to claims as a leader because they've gotten that experience, they've gotten that perspective of how the business works. And so it's a really good way to expand your skill set and really broaden the pool of potential next level positions if those positions aren't available in claim at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Rob, and a good way to kind of zoom out for folks to figure out what's going to be the best fit and the best path for them as they're developing their career. Bringing it back to claims a little bit and zooming in a little bit, you know, Cord, we had talked a little bit about kind of how does someone figure out if claims is the right fit for them, right? Not, you know, to Rob's point, necessarily for them to be locked into that career path for the length of their career, but kind of figuring out if that's where your passion lies and it's something that, you know, they can build a career in. So can you comment on kind of how someone might figure out if claims is the right fit for them?
You know, this is probably one of the most important things from the perspective of as you start into claims, either you're going to love it or like it, or you just hate it. And from the perspective of, you know, you can't get yourself promoted out of the love like. You know, you've got to really engage it and go through it. And it's one of those things that some people just don't like confrontation. Some people don't like having to deliver the bad message of I can't pay your claim and some of those type of things. And if it's not a fit for you, what I always say is find out early. You know, make sure, because it's one of those things as you go through your career, if you've got something that you're doing that you just don't like and you're dreading going to work every day, you need to analyze that for yourself. What do you like? What do you don't like? And I kind of compare it to you can be in claims and there's some tremendously different jobs. A first party claim handler that's handling, let's say, residential property, the relationship that you have with the insured who's having their claim is much different than a third party auto claim where you're arguing over the fender being 10 years old and they want a brand new one and all the stuff that goes with that, and you're just kind of going through that day in, day out. And sometimes what I always say, and this is what I really preach to my staff, is make sure you understand your purpose of what you're doing and helping people in their time of need and how you do that, rather than thinking about the transactions. Because a lot of times if you get caught up in just doing the transactions, you know, you can almost compare yourself to an accounts payable clerk rather than a true claim professional, because it is so much different. And, you know, as you start to think about that and you start to really, what I would say, take that deep dive into yourself and your career, if you've done that and you really like claims, what I'll tell you is that's the stepping stone of being able to get promoted and being able to be that person. The thing that I look for whenever I interview, and this sounds crazy, I look for the person that has a want to attitude. And you can ask that and it comes out, I want to talk to the injured worker. I want to gather the information. I want to educate them, rather than somebody goes, well, I have to talk to this person. I have to gather this. I have to do that. And the difference between that mentality is tremendous when you have somebody that they truly want to help the injured worker or in the injured party and walk them through and educate them and build the trust and really work through it. That is really the stepping stone of being what I would say a claims professional, and being able to put yourself on that ladder so that you can get to the next level and keep on going.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Cord, and it's kind of the difference between building a career and working a job, right? Is finding something you're passionate about that you want to keep doing and doing well. You know, one of the things Rob alluded to a minute ago is kind of that broad exposure piece and the value that that can provide on an individual, especially as they ascend in their claims career. So, Steve, I know you're passionate about this topic. Why can you comment a little bit on why it's so valuable for someone to obtain kind of a broad skill set and broad exposure?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having broad skill sets creates value for both yourself and for the organization. It's no secret that the claims industry is seeing a need for talent across a multitude of disciplines. And so, if you, at whatever stage of your career you're in, can create a set of fundamental principles for claims, you can translate that across a number of disciplines and layer on top specific skill sets for a particular area and create success. You know, I had a boss that once said, be comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's what I would recommend to this group. Trust in your core principles, but then expand that broadly to whatever opportunities might present themselves to you. I think you'll find that claims is different in many areas, but very similar across many disciplines.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and it kind of speaks to one of the things that Forbes has a couple of great articles on, if anybody's looking for some good reading, and that's the comparison of building a career ladder or a career lattice. And the idea there is the best next step isn't always a higher leadership role or the promotion to a manager. A lot of times they're lateral opportunities that can help you long term because you're getting exposed to more, so you're going to be better prepared for management roles in the future with broader responsibilities. So Rob, I know you have some experience with this, and you've seen some folks in their own career development kind of go that route and benefit from it. Can you comment on that idea of lateral moves in terms of building a long-term career?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is, again, one of the key themes for this discussion. And the concept of lateral moves, in my opinion, is critical when we think about career pathing. And I had a leader, to kind of piggyback on some advice that Steve mentioned. I had a leader who used to say, sometimes you need to go sideways to go up. And I think that's really sound and practical advice. When you read the article that Scott mentioned, it's a really good article, and I'd really encourage you to read it. But it talks about the fact that historically, I think career pathing has been very focused on the concept of promotion and simply moving up. But that article makes the case that really, when we think about building a career, we really need to think about developing what they call capabilities. And, the point of the article is moving sideways is necessary sometimes for career development because it helps you broaden your skill set. It helps you figure out what you like to do, which is one of the most important things that everyone needs to figure out. And it helps you figure out what you're good at in terms of your particular skill set. And this is something that I have some personal experience with. When I was at Travelers, I was working at the time in a legal position that was kind of the equivalent, I guess, of like an AVP. But I didn't have any direct reports. And I really wanted to get into leading people. And I told my leader at the time that I had that interest. And I think initially I was hopeful, oh, well, I'm just going to move into a leadership role as an AVP because that's the level I'm at, or maybe even go up. And unfortunately, when I looked around the organization, there really weren't those opportunities. And so I ended up taking a unit manager role, which actually was, if we think about things in a ladder, was actually a step down. But it was actually one of the best career decisions I ever made because it really gave me an opportunity to get experience leading people at a front level perspective before I jumped into a higher leadership role. It gave me an opportunity to figure out on a smaller scale, is this something I'm really interested in doing long term? And I think the best part about it is, I went through that experience, and the next time there was an AVP role that came open, I was able to walk into that interview and call upon some relevant experience that I would have not otherwise had. I was able to talk about my commitment and my desire to lead people. I could say, I wasn't just saying I wanted to lead people. I had taken a step back and demonstrated that commitment. So, I think it's a real important kind of thought to have to get out of your mind. I always need to go up. Really try to think about how can I build long-term capabilities to move up throughout the long term of my career. And a lot of times you have to go sideways to get that experience.
Yeah, and I think Rob, that's a great example, and you just hit on something that's super important, and that's there's technical skills, right? And there's things that you learn on the job, and there's things that you learn through formalized training, and then there are leadership skills. How can you do when you're not the one doing, and how can you lead a team to accomplish things? And I think to your point, putting yourself in that position where you had an opportunity and you were required to figure out the leadership piece in order to move up is very critical when you talk about the longevity of a career and setting yourself up for opportunities down the road. Cord, I know you have some thoughts on this, just the difference between leadership skills, technical skills, and kind of how you incorporate those in career development. So can you talk a little bit about that? And then we'll jump into kind of role-specific things.
Absolutely, Scott. From the perspective of as you're building your career, if you really focus on those, what I would say individual technical skills, a lot of times that is the activities that are so focused on the policy, on the contracts, on the jurisdiction and those type of things that you become that expert. But at the leadership level, when you start to think in terms of being able to take what's going on in the claims and looking at an inventory of claims, how it impacts the business, and how you need to have a staff be able to walk through and handle those claims for the best outcome for the organization, that it's a different skill set. And it's also the ability to realize that I have to influence people as a leader, and that influence is different than on the individual file where you're spending more time talking about, the paper, the policy, or the lawsuit, or whatever's in front of you. And from that perspective, a lot of times when you build the skills to be able to influence others, you have to have a little bit of the technical, but it's more about being able to push individuals to where you need them to be so that they're supporting your decisions and that they understand. And whenever you kind of put in those technical skills and you start to pull away from managing the individual file and managing an inventory of files and managing a group of people and influencing those people to not just show up and transact, but to impact and actually have good to great results rather than just mediocre results. And those are the type of things that when you're starting to build that career for yourself, that you have to think in terms of, I've got my technical skills, now how do I influence others? How do I use those technical skills to be able to influence more than just that one file and to be able to walk through that? And I think that's sometimes that individuals will become really technically strong because it's easy to wrap yourself up in that technical piece, but not being able to influence somebody and being able to influence a group and thinking in terms of how does this impact the organization? Because it kind of goes back to what Rob was saying is, if you know the business and then you apply your technical skills on an individual claim for the best outcome, but then from a leadership standpoint, you're putting all that together to be able to influence that for the business, not just the one individual file.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, right? And it's a good career skill, it's a good life skill as you broaden your impact. So with those kind of core concepts in mind, we'll shift gears a little bit. And, I think we have a large contingent of attendees today kind of in this space, and that is the adjuster, claims examiner type role, folks that are interacting, with people in the claims process and handling claims on a day-to-day basis. And so we're going to spend, some time talking about what that role looks like and how can you be successful, and equally as important, what should you be doing to set yourself up for the next promotion, the next opportunity, and how do you kind of maximize that stage of your career for long-term success. So I want to start that discussion with you, Steve, and high-level question here, but what would you recommend adjusters be doing to maximize their success in their current role?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. The first thing I tell everyone is build your core competencies and be relentless in your pursuit of continuous improvement. And what I mean by that is there's core competencies for claims that translate success: time management and organization, active listening, conflict resolution and or negotiation, and interpersonal and communication skills. The more you master those principles, the more success that's going to breed for you. And the beauty in what we do in claims is the landscape is ever changing. There's always something new to learn. There's always another skill to develop. And that's where the relentless pursuit of continuous improvement comes in. I like to tell folks that the first step in your personal development or career growth or preparing for a promotion is to be the best person or candidate in the role that you're in order to make you successful. And so be intentional about your career opportunities as well. Building on what Cord was just saying, seek opportunities to lead while you're in your current role. projects, team building activities, mentor roles, whatever that might be. I love the quote, you don't need to have a title to be a leader. And so for folks that are in that role right now, I would embrace that concept.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. And we have some good questions coming in from the group that we'll be touching on. So keep those coming. We'll get as many of those answered as possible. But I think it speaks to probably what a lot of folks are thinking out there is, I'm doing my job on a day-to-day basis, and I feel like I'm doing it pretty well, and I'm focused on the metrics that are put in front of me. But what other things should I have in the back of my mind that I should be working on, to develop myself as an individual and kind of carve out the career that I want? So again, speaking to that adjuster role, Cord, how can folks position themselves or prepare for the next opportunity so that they're ready when that opportunity does present itself?
Scott, from my perspective, one of the most important things is to think in terms of, I have to influence the interviewers to see me in the role, to actually see me filling the role and being successful in the role. And you do that by, and it's a couple of things. One is making sure you know the job description and those characteristics and the competencies that they're asking for in the job description, that you're able to put together your story to be able to say, I can do those things. I can do those things at the next level. And you have good examples for that. One of the toughest questions that I ask is usually the first one, and that is, what have you done to prepare yourself for this role? And waiting for individuals to tell me what they've done. And sometimes if they have a good story to tell, I don't have a lot of questions I have to ask, because here they are spending their 20 minutes talking about everything that they've done, their plan that they've walked through and done. If you answer that with, I've been in this role handling claims for 10 years now and I'm ready, what I can tell you is that's not going to make you the best candidate when you have others that are able to say, I job shadow, I've handled these claims, I've stepped in whenever my manager was on maternity leave, I did this, I did that, I've done all these other things, and I've got some designations, and I've done this. And when you start to think in terms of making yourself the best candidate, that's the story that you have to tell, because sometimes people will get upset over not being picked, and you have to really think in terms of, am I the best candidate? Was there somebody else that is ahead of me, that they've done all those things and they're ready for the role now, as opposed to, this interview is a great time for me to network, for me to reach back out and ask the question of, what else do I need to do to be the best candidate? And in some ways, doing that, instead of asking about, how did I fail, or, what was the reason, asking about what they see as the additional things you can do, is a big plus, because it gives that interviewer the ability to talk about activities rather than talking about you, and be able to say, okay, here's a list of things that you could probably work on in the next 6 months. And then it also gives you the option of being able to, if you're not picked, saying, how often do these positions come up? And what do I need to do between now and then to be the next candidate? And then get some time on their calendar and talk with them about what you're executing on your plan to make yourself the best candidate. And sometimes, and I'll tell you, sometimes it's tough, that you don't want to go into state of denial. If you've interviewed with someone and they tell you some things, it's one of those things. That opinion is important. Absorb it and then put together your plan. Don't try to fight back with it.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Cord, because those are all learning opportunities, right? So you never want to walk away from a situation not better, right? There's a great quote out there that says, I either win or I learn, I never lose. And I think that's a great mentality to have when you talk about a career, because there's going to be ups and downs, there's going to be opportunities, and you want to make sure that you're maximizing every interaction you have. I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar that we were going to aim to make this very applicable, with tools that folks can walk out of here with to better their careers. And one of the things that we'll be sending to everybody who registered for this webinar is a list of interview questions, common interview questions to prepare for, things where you want to have a story ready to go. So as Cord said, you have examples, you can show that you're ready for that next stage. So we've compiled that list. We'll be distributing it after this webinar. And hopefully it's one of those tools that you can have on your desk. And as situations come up, right, there's adversity. What did you do to overcome it? How did you develop that plan? What was the outcome? You can kind of record some of those things that you might otherwise move on from and forget about, so that you have a great story to tell in your next interview. So we'll distribute that after. Hopefully that's something that you all can use kind of on a day-to-day basis to help build your career, build your story, so that you're prepared for the next opportunity that comes across your desk. The other thing that we talk about here is technical specialist opportunities versus leadership advancement opportunities. This kind of ties back to, one of the common themes around the next opportunity might be lateral, it might be going into a silo. One of the questions that we had from the group kind of ties into this, and that is, the question came, would you recommend steering my career into one path or continue to handle everything that comes at me at the same time? And, I think there's some bullets that you have, Rob, around kind of what that looks like, where you kind of dictate, right, what you want to do and take control of your career path. So if you can comment on that, Rob, I think that'd be helpful for the group.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to just make one quick comment on something that Cord said, because I think it's really important, and hopefully I can share some practical ideas, because Steve made the point. Well, let me take a step back. Anytime you're moving for the first time into a leadership role, you've never been in that role. So you can't walk into an interview and say, hey, here's all these examples I did when I was a formal leader, unless you brought leadership experience from another organization. So you have to figure out a way that you can either showcase leadership outside the formal title. And Steve made a great point. Leadership does not require a title. So in preparing to make that jump to leadership, I would look for opportunities. Raise your hand. Are there things that you can do informally to be a leader? Like I have the term leader on the floor. Are there trainees that you're bringing into your organization that you could offer to spend time with, maybe mentor them to show them the job? Are there projects within your organization which would give you an opportunity to kind of lead a team, so to speak, in doing something, away from your desk for the organization? Are there leadership classes either internally or externally that you could take? Can you get involved in an organization like Rise to demonstrate your willingness in your career development? So there's a lot of things you can do, even though you don't have the title, to demonstrate and give you experience kind of leading in an informal setting. So I just wanted to point that out, because I think Cord made a good point and Steve did as well. But it's kind of like, how do I show people that I'm going to be a good leader? That's always difficult to do, but there's some things you can do as you work towards that interview. All right, so I was going to answer your question, but sorry, Scott. Okay, so it kind of gets back to the idea of, well, what path do I want to go on? Because there's lots of different ways you can go. And I kind of bucket things sometimes in a technical path and a leadership path. And that's not saying you got to pick one or the other right now. But what I do think is important is really thinking about aligning your skill sets and what you like to do with the path that you're going to go down. And you may still be trying to figure that out. And that gets back to some of the conversation about exposing yourself to different areas of the company. But, one thing I want to point out, I think sometimes when people aren't as thoughtful about their career, what I've seen is someone who is a very, very strong adjuster. They are the best adjuster in that role. They got a ton of technical experience, and a management job comes up and they say, well, I'm really good at this role. The next step for me is applying to be a leader. And that's not to say that people that are great claims adjusters can't be great leaders. And many times they are, but that's just not always the case. And I think the point is, before you think about throwing your hat into the ring for a management position, you really want to find out what goes into the role, really what it's like to lead others, especially as a frontline manager. I'll be honest, sometimes it's not that glamorous. It may not be totally what you think it is. And, I think sometimes for some people that jump can be challenging because they used to be responsible for their own work. They're a very high performer. And now I have to lead and influence others. And that's a different skill set. So I think it's really important that when we think about these things, that people do a self-assessment, a self-inventory. What do you like to do? What are you good at? And really figure out, if you're going to jump to leading others, that you're doing it for the right reasons, because that's what you would enjoy doing. That's what you're passionate about. And it's not just, hey, I'm going to go to the next leadership role. because there are technical roles that you can be promoted to. You could go to handling litigation. You could move to a major case unit. There are different technical roles in a technical career path. And if you're interested in leadership, this is a small plug for the next section, find a mentor who you can ask about leadership and what it's like to lead others.
Yeah, I think it's a key point there, Rob, and thanks for tying back on the notes that Steve and Cord made, because I think it's very, very important. So when you talk about mentorship, that's a really broad topic, right? And can kind of mean anything from, you know, a little bit of advice from somebody you ran into at a conference to, you know, a formal structured meeting that you have regularly on the calendar with somebody who's, you know, to some degree invested in the success of your career. So I think it's a good topic to hit on kind of as we're talking about that adjuster level and setting yourself up for a successful career. A little bit, if you can, comment about, you know, the impact of mentorship. And real quick before you do, I am going to give a shameless plug to Rise's mentor program. We had a phenomenal number of attendees, mentor and mentees this year. And it really is one of those things that ties core into Rise's mission of developing that next wave of professionals and helping folks get to the next stage in their career, develop as an individual so that they can be more successful. So it's definitely something that's near and dear to a lot of folks that are on this call, myself as well. But it's just a component of it, right? And so, you know, there's many different ways mentorship can take form. And so, you know, hearing from you on kind of with your experience being on both sides of that, what kind of impact does that have on a career?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if you find the right mentor or mentors, and I think the key phrase there is the right ones, I think it's probably one of the most important things that you can do in terms of your career pathing. There's a really good article, another Forbes article that I would share. It's entitled "Finding the Right Mentor for You." And this article really resonated with me because mentorships can be really good, just okay, or not that great at all. They're kind of all over the board. And what the article really recommends is asking yourself, what do you want to get out of the mentorship? And you want to think about what would success look like for me? Where do I want to be in 5 years? So again, you kind of have to do some self-reflection and self-assessment about where you want to go before you kind of jump into picking someone, you know, as that mentor. And again, you know, going back to this kind of what path do I want to be on? Do I want to be on a technical path? Do I want to be on a leadership path? Do I want to be on this path? It's okay to have multiple mentors. You could find someone that you look up to from a technical standpoint and who's in a very high technical role, and they can kind of give you their experience, their perspective, kind of going down that path. You could find someone who's in a leadership role. They could give you that perspective. So I think a mentor can also kind of try to help you still figure out which direction you want to go. But I think the most important thing about any mentorship is that it's meaningful. And I know that some companies have formalized mentorship programs, and I would encourage you to participate in those. But just being honest, I think the most successful mentorship relationships I've seen are the ones that are not forced, the ones that kind of pop up organically. And, you know, I would look around your organization, look for someone that you aspire to be, look for someone who shares similar values. And, you know, this may be obvious, but someone you like being around, someone you enjoy being around. If you don't like your mentor and they don't like you, obviously the relationships can kind of be doomed. So you really need to find someone who has the time, they're interested in mentoring you, and you enjoy being around them. And keep in mind, you know, to Scott's point in the plug about the Rise Mentorship Program, your mentor doesn't have to be in your organization. You can have a mentor in your organization who might be able to give you a very good perspective of how you navigate that organization and what his or her experience has been. But it would be great also if you could find someone outside your organization who can give you a different perspective. Maybe they can share an outsider's perspective or have a broader perspective based on their experience. You know, I think about the most successful people that I've seen have multiple mentors. And what I've tried to do in my career is build those relationships with multiple people who I call a quote unquote mentor, and really try to take as much as I can from each of them. And you end up taking a little bit from different people. Last point I'll say about mentorship is not only someone who can give you advice and someone who you can confide in and get, real constructive feedback. All those things are super important. But one of the values of having a mentor is it's someone who can advocate for you, someone who is a cheerleader or fan of yours that can go to bat for you at the right time. So I just think it's such a critical thing, but you just got to be thoughtful about how you kind of find the right one for you.
Yeah, Rob, I think that's a really great point, and it's really critical in that adjuster stage of someone's career to kind of learn from folks who have been there and folks that want to see them do well. And that personal connection is so important, right? When you talk about somebody giving you impactful advice or helping you navigate a situation that's come up either, over the course of a role with the company or individual situations. We had one of the questions that came in was around, I'm seen as a young person, as a first-time adjuster. And so when I raised my hand, this individual said when they raise their hand for leadership opportunities, a lot of times they're looked at as, you're too young for this. We don't have, that type of opportunity for someone in your role. And I think what you're speaking to with a mentor, somebody that believes in you, that's at a higher level, can help open that door for you, right? And can help position you in a way that you are in the conversation for that next role. So I think that's a tremendous tool that you can use to make sure you're not missing out on opportunities. And if there is something that you need to develop as an individual to be considered for that next position, certainly a mentor or mentors can really help you perform or get to that level where you can put yourself in contention for that role. So I think that was a really good question from the group, and I think you kind of hit it as you were talking through, how impactful that can be.
Yeah, and I just want to make a comment. I don't know if this is leadership doesn't know an age. This is just Rob talking. It doesn't know an age. I think I've had times where I've thrown my hat in the ring for positions that I didn't think I was going to get. And I had someone who encouraged me to do that and gave me the self-belief to do that. And I would just encourage people out there. I know people say, well, you got to be in a job for so long and you got to learn this, and that is all true. But find someone who's going to give you that support and self-belief that you can do that. And don't be, I don't know how to say it, don't be bashful. Believe in yourself and figure out what you need to do to get, to be a serious candidate. Work with your mentor and get that support that you need. I would not be discouraged by that, I guess is what I'm trying to say, or please don't.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And there's a lot more we could dig into at that adjuster level, but in the interest of time, I think, we want to move on to that next step. And this is really a fascinating move when you talk about a career journey. And that is, a common next step from a claims handler is into that first manager role, right? You're moving from peer to manager, from individual contributor to leader. And, that can be very challenging for folks who haven't made that transition before. And so, Cord, coming back to you, can you comment on kind of that initial transition from individual contributor to manager, specifically in the claims space, and some of the things that folks ought to be doing or considering to make that transition successful?
Absolutely. And this is probably the most difficult transition from a leadership role, is going from being a peer to individuals to possibly being their leader and being their boss. And it's one of those things I always caution individuals that in some ways, if you've become, it's almost easier if you just inherit a new team that you've never worked with compared to all of a sudden you're in your team and you're the person that gets promoted, and all those coworkers that you have relationships with that you have to figure out how to kind of navigate going from their friend, their coworker to their boss. And what I would say is, in today's environment, social media can really hurt you or can really help you. And you have to make sure that you kind of manage that, and that you manage it from the perspective of it's about you being the leader, not you being full access social media and having comments with them all over social media that probably could be construed as inappropriate and such. And one of the most important things is to be able to walk through what how you interact with each member of your team, so that everybody feels like they're getting a fair shake from you, that you don't have a couple of individuals that are your favorites because you play golf with them, or you go to wine tasting with them, or book club, or whatever. And you start to pull back from those a little bit to make sure that every individual that reports to you feels like you're their advocate rather than you're excluding them. And from the perspective of also having conversations with them early on about how you're going to support their success. If you're that really young person that just got promoted and you've got somebody that's been hacking away at it for 20 years and they're sitting there going, why did you get it rather than me? What I can tell you is the best thing you can do is sit down with them and talk about those next steps. What's your plan? And putting that together for them and showing that you'll support them because you're asking for them to support you, and going through that with them. And that's the type of things that in some ways it's a little difficult, but it also gives you the biggest rewards. The other thing that is kind of a change is all of a sudden those individuals that are reporting to you, you're having discussions about your expectations. And instead of just telling them what to do, you're making sure they understand what you want them to accomplish and your expectations. And if they don't meet your expectations, then you start talking about, what is your plan to meet my expectations? What are you going to do? How are you going to get this caught up? How are you going to improve your customer service scores? All those type of things. And you start talking about them and what they're doing and their plan and their activities and your expectations. And it becomes a little bit easier, rather than talking about whether you like or dislike. You're talking about, here's what I need you to do. This is my expectation. This is the ticket to the seat to show you showed up every day with that. Then we're good. If you don't, then we're going to be talking about your plan and how you need to fix things. So Scott, that's kind of it in a nutshell. It's kind of changing the conversations you have, changing the relationships, and then making sure that you don't have anybody on your team that is kind of excluded. That's if you're going to lunch with one, you got to go to lunch with all.
Yeah, it changes that perspective about who all is included and how you address the folks around you, right? To that point, setting yourself up for that, some of the things that you have to work on as an individual, right, to make that leap and become a manager, it's really important that you have the right kind of traits and skills honed in so that you can be successful in that role. And a lot of it ties back to what you just mentioned, Cord. So Steve, when somebody is in that role, right, and they are a manager and they've built themselves in a position where they're executing on some of the things that Cord alluded to, what then can they do to kind of enhance their traits, enhance their skills to set themselves up for a more senior role, kind of the next step on the career path?
Yeah, Scott, I would agree with Cord that making that jump from individual contributor to that first level leader is absolutely probably the biggest challenge, but equally as challenging is going from that first level of leadership into a more senior role. And so some of the things that I look for are the person's ability to influence and what their EQ is. Can they build relationships across the larger enterprise? A leader's greatest resource is their people. So I look for someone's ability to build a team around them and to identify top talent. So does that person have a self-awareness to know what their own strengths and opportunities are, and then ability to build a team around them to meet the needs of the organization? On top of that, understanding that the impact of decisions you make in a more senior role have consequences or an impact on a larger audience. And so do they understand that? Do they have the ability to think through downstream impacts of larger decisions and being able to demonstrate that competency? And then lastly, strategy and vision. Can that person see into the future? Again, coming back to continuous improvement, do they have a desire to do things differently or better, or to have a change management ability to change the norm to give our organization a competitive advantage. So you have to not only have that vision of where you want the organization to go, but you need to have that ability to galvanize people around that message, around that goal, and bring everyone together. That's what I look for.
Yeah, so important. And I think, to your point, as you ascend, everything you do is amplified, right? The effect is greater, good, bad, or indifferent. And so having kind of that set in terms of how you operate is absolutely critical. So zooming out even further to kind of that next rung on the ladder, we're going to talk about that next move that you alluded to, Steve, which is managing managers, right? And so now we're very high up on the ladder. We are talking about AVPs, claim directors, those types of positions. And one of the biggest adjustments is managing managers. And Rob, I know obviously you have some experience here, so we'll start with you and we'll kind of go through this quickly as we're at the 10-minute mark. What would be your advice to folks stepping into a role where they're managing managers for the first time?
Yeah, it's a lot what some of the stuff Steve hit on. It's really appreciating the difference between that role and a frontline manager role, and what may have been successful managing frontline associates doesn't translate to leading leaders. So I think when you think about the importance as you get higher in the leadership, you really need to shift your focus, as Steve was mentioning, to strategic direction of your department. You need to have a good sense of how your department is performing in terms of key metrics, good sense of whether your teams are executing on strategic initiatives. You need to be able to, as Steve pointed out, proactively identify anticipated organizational opportunities and then be able to respond to those with strategic action. The best way I can kind of say, I say this a lot to kind of my higher level leaders, you need to be less focused on, working in the business and more focused on working on the business and constantly asking, what can we do to improve? What can we do to move the business forward with consistent strategic objectives? Less of the day-to-day. When you're managing frontline, you're the problem solver, you're the technical resource. You need to be in the minutia of the day-to-day. So when you move to that next level, you really need to kind of zoom out your focus and zoom out your influence. And the last thing I'll say is the importance of how you interact with the rest of the organization is absolutely amplified.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Rob, and it ties nicely into what Steve was just mentioning around the prior move, right? And how you're managing different people and what you say matters differently because there's different stakeholders at the table, right? And you're talking about the company now. You're not talking about your book of claims. And so on that note, Steve, we've had a couple of questions come in around multi-lines of business. And as you get to a level where you're overseeing something that maybe you didn't quote unquote grow up in the claims world, how do you kind of navigate overseeing multiple lines of business, and what's the importance of how you direct operations within your tower?
Yeah, going through that right now in my own career, the first thing I would tell you is trust in your core principles of leadership and what got you into that role individually, but then trust in your team. You don't need to be the best technician. You're not going to be the best technician. You need to be able to ask the right questions and seek to understand, what's going on in that particular discipline while leveraging the talents of your team, and take the opportunity to ask those questions and offer a different view or a different lens from your own experience. I like to say I don't know what I don't know. So a lot of times asking the question of why we do something fosters greater discussion across the enterprise of, maybe we do it that way because we always did it that way, or maybe there's a very well-intentioned reason that we do it that way. So don't be afraid to ask the questions, but trust in the teams that you're leading. And then lastly, the one thing I found success with, we preach a lot in our organization that we're one team. It doesn't matter what what part of the claims organization you're working in, we operate as one team. So I encourage a lot of interaction between my leaders of the different claims disciplines oftentimes they'll learn more or as much from one another as they may from me and I from them. So encourage that collaboration across the multiple disciplines, because I think all of the disciplines will get better as a result of that.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And, you know, as a senior leader, I think asking folks who are specialized, right, in an area that maybe you're not as technically sound in, gives them an opportunity to provide value to the broader discussion, right? So when you talk about empowering people, engaging people, and them wanting to be part of your team and a contributing member of your team, that's a great way to let them kind of, you know, show off their knowledge and help you understand a part of the business that, you know, you don't have as much history in, while they still feel valuable for having that level of expertise. So we'll get to a couple minutes of Q&A here at the end, but one question I thought that would be really interesting to ask this group, as kind of a lightning round, really quick answer is, you know, what's the biggest area of focus for the senior person in a claims organization? You know, what do you wake up thinking about top of mind? So Cord, I'll start with you. Just a quick answer on number one area of focus for a leader of a claims organization.
You know, it kind of comes down to two. One is, what is my greatest weakness that hasn't presented itself, and me being ahead of that. And then number two is the resources that are outside of my control that I need to influence, or I need to put a business case together to be able to support those resources supporting me. And the best example I've got with that is, your IT resources are limited, so you have to put together a business case that has priority over maybe somebody else's business case to be able to influence the IT resources to come play in the claims game rather than go do something else.
That's a great answer. I've heard the IT thing once or twice too, in the insurance space. Rob, what about you?
I'll give three quick ones. First and foremost, making sure that your organization's performance, goals, and strategic initiatives are fully aligned with larger enterprise goals. And that requires being very close to leaders in other parts of your organization, whether it's underwriting, profit center, distribution, actuarial. You need to make sure the work that your claims organization is supporting those broader initiatives and fully aligned. Second thing I think a lot about is, I kind of think of myself as a strategic lever puller. So what I wake up thinking about every day, are we pulling the right levers at the right time? Are we doing what we can do? And do we need to be doing things differently to execute on our strategic initiatives? Last thing I think for any senior leader, you always need to be thinking, what does our team need from me and my leadership team right now? And are we giving that to them for them to be successful?
Great points. Steve?
I'll hit on a couple others that haven't been said. People first for me, always making sure that our talent level within our organization continues to grow and improve, and what can I do to contribute to that talent. Secondly is, you need to be well read in our industry. Most of our problems that we are going to have, we're probably not even thinking about right now. If you cycle back 4 years pre-pandemic, nobody was thinking about the impact that would have on our business. So trying to be out in front of what is the next strategy, what is the next challenge, and how do we position our organization to respond to that.
Great. Outstanding points. And I know there's a number of questions here. We're going to get to them. I'll even after the webinar's over, I'll respond to a few of them. But maybe 20 seconds. There's one that came up a few different times. So I'll pass this over to you, Steve, for a very quick answer, and then we'll wrap up. How important are designations in someone building a career?
I think they're important. I'll answer that by, it depends on the organization that you're in and the value that that particular organization puts in them. I think they're valuable because it shows continuous learning, it shows continuous improvement, and it always betters yourself and your resume. Although I will tell you that just because someone has a designation does not qualify them to be the best person for that opportunity. So I hold a lot of value in them, but it's not the only thing that I would look for in a leader.
Great, thank you. And that came up a couple of times, so I think it's on a lot of people's minds. with that, we're right at the end, so I'm going to wrap us up here. But I wanted to say thank you to everybody that joined the presentation today. I hope you found it helpful. You know, this expert panel that we have here put a lot of effort into it. So check it out on the Rise YouTube channel. It will be up shortly, but we greatly appreciate everyone's participation. And Rob, Steve, Cord, thank you so much for you know, sharing your time and expertise. I thought it was a great discussion, and obviously Rise, Ethos, appreciate everybody's involvement for putting this on. But with that, I'll say goodbye, and everybody have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
guys.